Is reacting to news of the latest Israeli raid. The UN's humanitarian coordinator in Palestine said she was alarmed by the scale of the operation and called for the injured to be given access to medical help. Jordan has called for an immediate end to the Israeli operation and urged the international community to pressure Israel's government. There's been condemnation from other countries in the region. Egypt said the military operation was a violation of international law. Iran called it an act of state terrorism. It's also been condemned by the Arab League. Well, let's bring in Marwan Bishara. He's Al Jazeera's senior political analyst, and he's joining us by Skype from Paris. Marwan, very good to see you. I think that you were listening to the interview that we just did with the Jerusalem Post's Jeremy Bob, and he was covering just why the Israelis and the Palestinians, why this conflict, pretty much why the conflict just goes on and on. He was saying that Israel has a right to self-defense and that they are carrying out operations against what Israel sees as terrorists who are not ready for peace. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm certainly not in a debate with an Israeli journalist who works for basically a journal that belongs to Netanyahu and is spinning talking points from a guide that I wrote about in Al Jazeera online. It's a guidebook that most Israeli radical journalists, so-called, refer to, using keywords, spin words, and the likes in order to sound smart on television and sound like Israel is doing the right thing. Just your very last expression just goes to the heart of the point. Israel has the right to defend itself. Yes. Israel does not have the right to defend its occupation or its settlers or its soldiers on occupied land, a land that's been occupied for over 50 years. Every country in the world has the right for self-defense. And as you said yourself in your follow-up question, but Israel is an occupying power. Israel is an occupying power and does not have a right to be so 5 decades later, when there are international resolutions at the UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly, hundreds of them, urging, demanding, condemning, and so on and so forth, Israel to withdraw, and never did. And to his other points, we've already known now over the past 20 years all the lies that came out about Camp David. Even recently about the Israeli generous offer. It wasn't generous. It was, in fact, very stingy. In fact, it was all a setup against Yasser Arafat. Even President Bill Clinton, now we know from the archives of the White House, has lied. Clinton himself playing a lawyer in defense of Israel. So all these talking points, which of course we don't have the time for now, why? Because we are focusing on the massacre in Jenin. And once again, Israelis are clever, including the journalists, who really spin more of the same talking points in order to tell us that Israel doesn't have any other choice. It does have choices. It can withdraw from the occupied land. It considers the Palestinian Authority its partner, but it has not talked to the Palestinian Authority basically since 2009. President Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, is sitting in Ramallah now, basically waiting by the phone for anyone to call him. Not only did Netanyahu not call him, also the so-called moderate government previous to Netanyahu, the Yair Lapid government that today supports the assault, the aggression, the inhumane offense against Jenin, also would not sit down with President Abbas to talk about peace. When Biden was in Jerusalem, American president last year, he urged the Israelis to talk about peace. They wouldn't. He signed a memorandum of understanding with them. Every point in the memorandum of understanding is about Israel and the United States, except one point. And guess what that is? The peace process. The Israelis won't even commit to the same generic language about the peace process. So within the memorandum of understanding, the so-called Jerusalem Memorandum of Understanding, it was only Biden that said that he commits to a peace process with the objective of a two-state solution. But no Israeli official, and certainly not this Israeli government, headed by Netanyahu and a number of fascists and fanatics would commit to a two-state solution, would even commit to a peace process with the Palestinians. So what are they doing instead? They are expanding the illegal occupation, civilian and military, like we've never seen before over the last 50 years. And why the timing against Jenin now in particular? Well, guess what? There is a bit of a tactical reason. This government has just reversed the decision made in 2005 to clear 4 illegal outposts around Jenin. Well, this government has illegitimately decided to repopulate 4 illegal settlements around Jenin that, again, were withdrawn back in 2005. So you can imagine that this fascist, genocidal Israeli government that actually speaks those words, that it wants to replace the Palestinians. It would love the Palestinians to leave. It wants to continue with the occupation. It wants to continue with the illegal settlements. It would not listen to its partners in Paris, London, or Washington, and that it insists on the same pathway. And it keeps talking about, guess what? Limited military operation. You know what? I've heard a lot of limited military operations in Jenin, in Ramallah, in Hebron, and in Gaza. And you know what the limited military operation reminds me of? The invasion, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Because that's what we're having here. More invasions, more assaults, and more massacres.
Marwan, thank you very much for your analysis. As always, we really appreciate it. Marwan Bishara, live in Paris.